Many years ago, I noticed a very explicit message on my wife of 14 years' work phone. Laura and I had been through everything, including her going back to college and having a child. I could have never predicted that she could do that. I was still somewhat in denial, so I had to find the truth. You see, 2 years ago, when I asked her about it, she said that it was a phone provided by the hospital. Remember this, I didn't question it. When I came to the conclusion that an affair was likely, I threw up. She had to come check on me, but I didn't say anything. It honestly made me sick being around her, knowing that this is what she did to me. But I laid low, and for the next week or so, I was walking around in a daze, trying to put all the pieces together. I was driving myself absolutely insane, but I couldn't let her know that I knew. So I waited. Every time one of our kids had left a book in Laura's car, it was an excuse to visit the hospital. Laura had told me personal visits were frowned upon. My kid went up to get Laura's car key. I'd forgotten my key to her car at home. I talked to a nurse in the lobby and joked about how work phones seem like a blessing, but all they do is put you on call 24 hours a day. This led to her eventually telling me that the hospital was too cheap to give cell phones to nurses, so only high-level executives got them, which didn't include Laura. With pretty much everything confirmed, I took some personal time off the next day to talk to a divorce lawyer. The news she gave me was horrible. We lived in a community property state with no-fault divorce. I made more money than Laura. She'd been the primary caretaker of the kids, and we'd been married for more than 10 years. Basically, if I filed for divorce, I'd be screwed. Lose the house, pay alimony, she'd get a huge chunk of my retirement, and I'd pay child support for the next decade unless I was lucky enough to be awarded joint custody. The worst thing she told me was that it didn't matter that she cheated. It didn't matter. I was crushed. There was only one person I could trust with this kind of information. She was a fellow teacher that had also made the jump to administration, but was stuck at a school site. Let's call her Jen. Remember her. Jen had been married at 19, but her marriage ended when he got some other woman pregnant. Since then, she'd focused on her career, and we'd found we were kindred spirits in a lot of ways regarding K-12 education. I talked to Jen. She said something to me that changed my whole mindset. If you don't like the hand you're dealt, change the deck. I realized I had two problems. I made more money than Laura, and she had more time than me to be the primary caretaker of the kids. That was something I was going to have to take care of. The second issue was actually kind of easy. At every district office, there are jobs that are fast tracks to higher positions, and there are jobs that administrators suffer through, like mess or KP duty in the military. One of these dead-end regulatory positions was open again. Ambitious administrators leave after a couple of years when a better position opens up. I sat down with our district superintendent and asked about being transferred to that position. At first, he was shocked, but I told him that it was my time to take one for the team, and it would fill a hole in my admin experience. He agreed. It was really just crunching numbers with no personnel or student interaction, so I could set my schedule and even take a laptop home and work there. With my new free time, I began taking the kids to school, picking them up from school, not leaving them in after-school care or having my mother watch them, and taking them home. I'd help them with their homework, make dinner, etc. While the end goal was to become their primary caretaker, I can't explain how much I really enjoyed taking a more active role in their day-to-day lives. It was genuinely some of the most fun things I've done in my life. I remember so many nights where I'd cook meals they'd love and I got to learn so much about them. But the thing was, my salary hadn't been reduced, so I needed to find a way for Laura to make a lot more money than she was in her current nursing position, and that was going to be incredibly difficult to do. That's when I remembered Laura being mad after she'd earned her BSN and a supervisor told her, "In the future, bachelor's degrees will be worthless and everyone will need at least a master's degree." Laura had worked hard to get her BSN, and that supervisor's comment ticked all over her hard work. So I saw my chance, and I completely did it. I was going to have to sacrifice, but I didn't care. I talked her into starting an MSN program. I told her that since I had a much more flexible work schedule, I would keep taking care of the kids. She was reluctant at first. Then I said, "You could have every evening free to study or go to class, whatever you want to do." I saw her eyes immediately light up, probably thinking that she could spend more time with Rick. This was a fuse I had dropped to gauge her reaction, and her eyes lighting up indeed showed me everything I needed to know. Perhaps I was still in some denial, but who knows. Anyway, to make sure she was actually completing her MSN courses, I paid her tuition and fees directly to her university. It was going to take her between 2 and 3 years to finish. Those years were rough at times. I could tell every time she was rushing off or coming back from seeing Rick. There was an excitement or sense of satisfaction in her eyes that just wasn't there when she was doing her coursework. I had to either smile or pretend I didn't notice. My temper got short at times, and I found myself in arguments over petty nonsense. A couple of times I almost blew the whole charade, having to bite my tongue and apologize rather than scream insults at her that she deserved. It was genuinely among the hardest things I've ever had to do in life, especially when she spent 3 days straight studying and sleeping at her best friend's house. And then, here's the thing. Remember Jen? Well, she remained my confidant through all of this. I had recommended her for my previous fast-track position, and she joined me at the district office. Jen was qualified, hardworking, ambitious, and only needed her foot in the door to impress the higher-ups. I even got a few pats on the back for recommending her after she impressed everyone. Jen and I started our own affair. It wasn't some hot-blooded, passionate romance, but two friends giving each other what they needed. Without Jen, I wouldn't have been able to maintain the charade of being the oblivious cuckold. But when Laura would come home smiling after spending time with Rick, I was able to bear it, smiling back because I had my own lover. Maybe it was shady or spiteful to do, but that was the only way I could truly give Laura what she deserved. And so, after 3.5 years of every ounce of my energy being poured into my task, every single day, Laura completed her MSN and was promoted at her hospital. Her salary went up substantially and was now higher than mine. That was the best goddamn moment of my life. The only thing that ever felt better was the day I married her. On the day she upped her salary, the kids and I made her a congratulations dinner. I made a joke about her being the breadwinner for the family, and she laughed, joking back, "You should be a stay-at-home dad now." Little did she know that the joke would absolutely come back to bite her. A month later, I went back to the lawyer who didn't remember me at first and told her the financial situation had drastically changed. With these new facts, she drafted the petition and filed it. When the kids were with my mother, I had Laura served. The deputy knocked on our front door, and I let him in, pointing at my wife. He asked her name and then handed her a copy of the divorce petition. With the deputy standing there, I told Laura I knew all about her affair with Rick, but I didn't tell her how long I'd known. I told her to go be happy with her doctor lover. She screamed at me, tried to lie, and then made the mistake of rushing toward me. The deputy stopped her and warned her that women go to jail for domestic violence too now. He suggested she pack a bag to stay somewhere else. Laura left after I promised not to tell the kids about her affair. I didn't tell the kids, but I told my mother, who told my sister, who told her kids, who told their cousins, my kids. It took a few days, but eventually, everyone knew that Dad was divorcing Mom because she had a boyfriend. I honestly didn't want my mother to go spilling it everywhere, but she did, and I couldn't do much about that. In the end, the court granted the divorce, giving me primary custody of our children because I was already their primary caretaker. I kept the house with the promise I'd refinance to buy out Laura's half. She was ordered to pay child support, and I used that fact to negotiate with her to give up any rights to my retirement if I bought her out. I was able to refinance my home. It was the era when banks threw money at everyone to buy or refinance a mortgage, and with a little money borrowed from my parents, I bought out Laura's community property interest in the home and in my retirement. The day she signed all the paperwork with my lawyer, finally ending any possible financial obligations to her, was the happiest I'd been. I felt like I could finally breathe. I celebrated with Jen, who'd been my rock through all of it, and that feeling was the best goddamn feeling I have ever felt in my entire life. I'm not ashamed to say that through the years, I'd cried many times in her arms. Jen and I would eventually fall in love. What was once an affair with two parties agreeing to relieve each other of stress slowly developed into deep, deep feelings. Things escalated, and Jen and I ended up going down on one knee to propose to her. We got married. In the immediate aftermath, she got promoted to a higher position, and I was convinced to take back my previous position at the district. When my youngest child reached high school, Laura and I got along well after the divorce. We took the kids to family therapy, and worked out this co-parenting thing for a few months. She had to withstand the kids asking why she needed a boyfriend when Dad was there all along. Between them and the therapist raking her over the coals, I didn't have to say anything at all. Laura missed a lot of time with the kids because of her now legitimately busy work schedule, and I actually felt bad that my children were missing time with their mother. So I encouraged them to talk to her on the phone instead. When Laura found out that I'd proposed to Jen, she congratulated me. She honestly did. I told her it's okay for her to marry Rick, too. She got sad. She told me that Rick had started seeing another woman, a younger nurse at the hospital, because with her new position, she didn't have time for him, and when they did get together, she wasn't fun anymore. My ex-wife, the woman who cheated on me and destroyed our marriage, was looking to me for sympathy. I had none to give. What I had was years of anger and frustration, years of knowing some other man was sleeping with my wife. I'd lost weight from not being able to eat. I'd suffered hypertension and had to confide in my doctor why it wasn't the stress of my job. I had to listen to my dentist complain about how I was grinding and listening to him tell me I'd need dental implants if it kept up. There were times when I had to be intimate with Laura to keep up the charade, fortunately infrequently, only to lie that I wanted to use rubbers to remind us how we used to have intimacy when we were dating, or because I might have a bladder infection, then go take a disease test anyway and wait for the results before seeing Jen again. But in the end, it was all worth it. Sure, Laura got a big payout when I bought her out of the house in my retirement, which she was trickling back to me through child support, but she lost everything else. Her kids only saw her every other weekend and spent a couple of holidays with her. Rick dumped her, and he was no great catch anyway, since he was twice divorced with 5 kids and paying alimony and child support through the nose. I kept my kids, my house, my income, my retirement. I got Jen, and I'm genuinely happy. All in a community property state with no-fault divorce.